So the lesson I chose is titled Mirror, Mirror, and it focuses on how light travels in order to generate reflection. So students are looking at different surfaces and they're seeing how the light bounces off of those surfaces and how that affects if there's a reflection or not, and overall how the light travels through it. So, can you see your reflection in a shiny surface compared to a dull surface, and so on and so forth. So they're walking around the classroom and taking note of which surfaces they can see the reflection on. And then they're also using a flashlight and bouncing that off of a plastic mirror in order to see how the light travels. And then they're also making real-world connections. So they're talking about something like a funhouse mirror, where your kind of image is distorted a little bit and seeing why is that different than a typical mirror, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, students are answering the question of why are mirrors the best object to use in order to view our reflections, and ultimately seeing how light travels through different surfaces. In terms of materials, you're going to need What Did They See by John Schneidel and Doug Cushman, I See Myself by Vicky Cobb and Julia Gorton, and then one per pair you're going to need a plastic mirror, an envelope with a question mark written on the front, a flashlight, a shiny metal spoon, a 5 centimeter by 5 centimeter crinkle aluminum foil square, and the student pages, mirror challenges, and silly spoons. In terms of the content standards and NGSS performance expectations, students are asking a question about objects, organisms, and events in their environment. They design and conduct simple experiments to answer questions, and they use data to conduct reasonable explanations. And then for content standard B, which is physical science, they're understanding that light travels in a straight line until it strikes an object, and light can be reflected by a mirror, refracted by a lens, or observed by the object. And then in terms of lesson objectives, they're learning about how light travels. They're learning about how the texture of a surface affects its ability to be reflective. They are completing the Can You See Yourself activity in order to determine what objects they can see their own reflection in, and they will ultimately observe how light bounces off of mirrored surfaces. Diverse learner needs, we can provide picture directions for students to view, maybe even a video, since not all students really understand directions that they have to read, so adding those visuals will be really important. We can give students more time where needed. We can even provide different worksheets in order to meet their needs. So maybe have a worksheet with deeper open-ended questions for those higher level learners. The teacher is also able to work more one-on-one with the students while the other students are working independently and in their groups. And students are working in pairs. They're having classroom discussions, which is helping their learning. They're utilizing the teacher-led instruction and are partaking in hands-on activities. Those hands-on activities are really important. They allow students to kind of have a better experience and more personalized experience with the topic. And overall, these can just help different learning styles. And on top of that, students are also vocalizing and writing down their ideas, which help both learners because some students like to write down their ideas, some students like to vocalize it. So ultimately that helps with that. Engagement, the teacher is using the story to kind of capture the student's interest. So they are reading the story. They also have a riddle in case that story isn't available. So if they can't read What Did They See, they have this riddle, and students will kind of think about the clues of the riddle and try to determine what that object is. And then this helps students get ready for the rest of the learning process. It gets them excited to learn. They are just geared up and ready to go. And they also are thinking about what the book will be about, if it's fiction or nonfiction, and why they are thinking these things. And in terms of questions, to help with engagement, the teacher should pass out an envelope with a question mark written on it, which then these students get to see, like, oh, what do they think is in there? What kind of object is in there? Determine that. And then once they open it, they will answer questions that are like, oh, what is the item? Were you correct? What did the characteristics of the stories think of the item? And so on and so forth. So they are taking what they're reading and applying that to these questions. Two different activities. There's Can You See Yourself and the Mirror Challenge. So in terms of Can You See Yourself, the hands-on activity is students walking around the room to see if they could see their reflection in every surface in the room. So they're looking at the windows, they're looking out of, items made out of metal and glass and the doorknobs, and maybe there's a spoon, or, can you see yourself in the book, and what can you see yourself, what can't you see yourself, and all of that. And in terms of big idea questions, the lesson actually provides the question of, in what things can you see yourself? What do these things have in common? Did you appear as clear in these objects as you appeared in the mirror? And why do you think the mirror was the best to see yourself? And then I also added some questions that we could talk about. So maybe we ask, why did types of objects do you think, or what other types of objects could you see yourself in that were not in the classroom? So think of things that we didn't see, maybe a body of water or a puddle or things like that. And then we could ask, do all shiny objects give off a reflection? And have students think about that. And also, is your face flipped in your reflection? So is it a mirrored image, or is it, straight, perfect? And they kind of think about that. In terms of the mirror challenge, the students are put in pairs, and the teachers turn off all the lights and make the room as dark as possible. Then the pairs use the mirror and the flashlight to complete the activity. So they'll shine the flashlight onto the mirror, and they see what happens to the beam of light. And then the teacher asks the following questions. They go, does the light from the flashlight go through the mirror, or where does the light go after it bounces off of the mirror? And then to add on to that, we could talk about, what did they see when the light was reflected off the mirror, kind of have them describe it themselves. They could see, would the same thing happen to a smaller or larger mirror? Would the rays be bigger or smaller? Would there be no change? And would this work with a different object, such as glass or a metal spoon, or is it just a mirror that would do this? In terms of explanation, these students are connecting their exploration to the concept they're learning about, and the teacher poses questions and has a certain technique in order to do this. So the teacher will start off by asking questions about the mirror challenge they've just completed, and they will be able to expand on that challenge. So they'll talk about, were they able to complete it? What were their feelings during it? What did they think about it? Did they have any difficulties, or were they surprised by anything? Or, what did they see in the mirror? What did their name look like in terms of when they put it in the mirror? And so on and so forth. And then they are also guided through the reading of I See Myself in order to make connections between the activity and the book. So here they learn why they can still see themselves the best through the mirror, and then compare them to other objects. So in terms of some higher level thinking questions, we could ask, why are mirrors the best object to see yourself? When a ray of light hits a mirror, what happens? Why can't you see yourself in a sweater or the pages of a book? And also, to add on to that, do you need light in order to see yourself, or can you see in the dark? Would the challenge be the same if it was conducted in a well-lit room? This challenge, it had to be completely dark, but could you do it in a well-lit room? Would you still see the light beams, or would you see nothing at all? And what is your main takeaway from the reading? And then all of these questions help the students determine the importance of the content that they just learned about. So in the elaboration stage, the students are making connections to their own personal life, and they're asked to think about the funhouse mirror and how those mirrors change the appearance of the reflection. So when we look at a funhouse mirror, our face is kind of distorted. We look taller or shorter or wider or smaller. And students are, seeing, why is that? It is a mirror, but it has the reflection look completely different. So, what about the texture and the surface of the mirror makes it do that? So they're expanding on their knowledge and using it to make educated guesses and come to new conclusions about the topic. So they're determining why the funhouse mirror shows off a different reflection than a regular mirror. And this overall helps expand their critical thinking skills. In terms of vocabulary, they'll learn about terms like reflection, light rays, and refraction. They get the first-hand experiences with these terms and will be able to get true examples of them. So instead of just saying, this is what reflection means, they're actually physically seeing what a reflection is. So they're not just seeing themselves on a shiny object and say, oh, I guess I'm seeing myself on a shiny object. They'll be like, oh, this is a reflection. Now I know what a reflection is. So they get a better understanding of how light travels and how it creates reflections and just those terms in general. And then this knowledge is applied in our daily lives because mirrors, reflections, and light are things that we deal with on a daily basis. We look at mirrors every day. We brush our teeth while looking at a mirror, or we wash our hands while looking at a mirror. We see mirrors every single day, and we also see light every day because it's the reason that we can see. So students are able to get experience with light and reflections and determine, why things are the way that they are, and just ultimately help create an understanding of the reason why things occur like this. Lastly, in terms of evaluation, the students will demonstrate they have achieved the lesson objective by completing the Silly Spoons worksheet. So they will show off their knowledge in the classroom discussion, They will complete the worksheet. The teacher will collect the worksheet and see, what did the students learn? What didn't they learn? So on and so forth. The students are also explaining in detail how the surface and texture of objects change, how light is reflected off of it, and the overall effect that it has. And that was the question we were ultimately trying to discuss this whole time. So by answering that question in detail, the teacher is able to see, did the students get the knowledge they were supposed to out of this lesson, or do we need to go back and kind of revisit things and all of that? So this teacher is going to listen to what the students are saying. They're going to grade their worksheet and overall just observe the students as they work through the lesson.